Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. It's January 24th, 2023, and the time is 6:01 p.m. I now call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission is conducted via remote participation. We will make recordings available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. My name is Courtney Kirk. I am one of the co-chairs of the Urban Design Commission from Public Space and Urban Forestry. Also tonight in the background from Planning, Preservation, and Zoning is UDC Liaison Andrew Graminsky. And we are also joined this evening by Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Deputy Director Dan Bartman. I will start the meeting with a roll call of the commission members present. Frank Valdez.
Present.
Andrew Arbaugh.
Present.
Tim Talon. Tim Talon is not here. Deborah Fennick.
Present.
Sherry Ruane.
Present.
And our alternate, Tim Hood.
Present.
All right. According to the agenda, our first order of business is the approval of minutes for September 27th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes, or do you all have comments?
I don't have any comments. Unless anybody else has a motion to approve.
All right, the motion has been made by Frank Valdez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, I heard Deborah first. A motion to approve the minutes from September 27th, 2022. Voting Frank Valdez.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just gonna stop for just a moment since Tim Talon is now present. And Tim, did you have any comments about the minutes from September 27th?
No.
Okay, all right. So I'm just gonna restate that there was a motion to approve the minutes from Frank. It was seconded by Deborah. I'm gonna restart the roll call vote. Frank Valdez.
Yes.
Andrew Arbaugh.
Yes.
Tim Talon.
Yes.
Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
Sherry Ruane.
Yes.
Tim Hood.
Yes.
Okay, all right. The minutes for September 27th have been approved. We have no design reviews for this evening, so our other business tonight is to jump back into the rules of policy and procedure. Commissioners, you received the most recent version of some edits to the rules and procedure, policy and procedure. Would you like to just go through section by section again?
I think that sounds good.
Okay. Alrighty.
Courtney,
Okay.
this is Andrew Graminsky.
Yes.
If you want, I could share my screen with the document and we can go through it.
That would be amazing.
All right, give me a sec to bring that up, please. Can you see my screen?
No, we see you.
Oops. Hold on a second.
Like emerged like a fade.
Oh yeah. All right, hold on. I pressed the wrong
It's very
button. That's
cinematic.
why. Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic.
All right. I don't recall there being many comments in the past about the section 1 general. Do you all have any comments about this section?
I do not.
I do not.
I do not have comments.
Okay. I think we can move on to section 2, board organization.
So one question under membership. It was asked the last time whether reappointments have to go before the AAL. Do we know whether that's the case?
Dan Bartman or Andrew Graminsky, do you have an answer for that?
I believe previously confirmed members are allowed to just be reappointed. Tim, I can follow up with you in email if you want to, but we haven't been doing the whole interview process for reappointments. So that's
Okay.
what leads me to believe that's how that works.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it just came up at the last meeting, so that's what I thought it was, but just wanted to confirm.
I think the other question that came up just looking is the officers is we recognize that this is unique, that we have city officials as the co-chairs of the commission, and trying to understand why that is.
Is the question why we did that in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess part of the sort of stated idea behind this sort of rules review is to get everything sort of in alignment so that it's consistent across. And this is one sort of very large notable area where this is not consistent with any other commission or committee within the city.
So two things. I would say that we're probably on a trajectory to amend this over time now that the commission has been up and running with many months of experience under its belt, including the operations of holding meetings. If you remember or maybe recall back, we had the design review committee previously, which wasn't run like a typical planning board or ZBA meeting, and was very informal in its prior nature. So one of the things that the mayor's office at the time proposed doing was to put the two directors related to urban design primarily into a position to run the meetings for the board members or the commissioners, because we also went through a time period where we needed time to appoint new people to the board, and we had interim commissioners, if you remember. Deborah, Frank, and Andrew, I believe, were all appointed for an interim urban design commission for some amount of time while we got the quote real urban design commission up and running operationally. So this is kind of a transitional feature that was designed to allow the membership to gain the experience running meetings. Procedurally similar to the planning board and zoning board, and then to eventually, I believe, withdraw from this type of thing and have the directors, I'm sorry, that have the chair come from the membership. One thing that we think that has worked really well, though, is that a PSUF representative and a planning department representative at the commission meetings and being heavily involved, at least in explaining things, has been really valuable. So, for instance, I think Courtney would probably weigh in that they've received a lot of value out of participating. So there is a remaining question about how to maintain that participation if we're going to move to the membership electing their own chairs, which I think is something that everybody's investigating right now, but we haven't moved to change anything until we answer those questions.
I definitely agree that having a PSUP rep and a planning rep is incredibly helpful. It's just being in the chair position that's
Yes.
sort of odd and weird. And so I guess since we're looking at rules essentially, what is the mechanism for making that change?
Any changes to the Urban Design Commission's purview would come out of legislation that the City Council would end up passing. So just like anything else, the enabling legislation that created the Urban Design Commission is in the zoning ordinance. So just like any other change to the zoning ordinance, that could come from the planning board, it could come from members of the public, it could come from the administration. The ZBA does not have the power to propose a zoning amendment either. I'll call that to your attention because you're also not cited as an entity that can initiate a zoning amendment. But that certainly doesn't mean that those board and commission members don't lobby to have changes made that are positive through the administration. So I imagine it would come through discussions with you all and the administration to propose any changes in the future. But certainly 10 registered voters can get together and make proposed changes for any zoning related item. But that would be the method that would get changed.
Okay.
Are there any questions about, I mean, I'm sure everyone's copy, if you're opening your file, has slightly different colors, but since we're looking at Andrew Graminsky's screen, I believe the bright red is the newest language added to the document. Is that correct, Andrew Graminsky?
Oh, and then there's blue and purple, right?
I think you're just
Or
saying
maybe-
that like me and Andrew were both typing today in the document. So like my edits are blue and his is probably red or
Those items are
vice versa.
Okay.
The new text has an edit in it. It's either crossed out or underlined or colored.
Yeah, and
Or underlined, right? Sorry, that
Yeah.
was the part,
Yeah.
underlined.
Dan, one more thing to add. And one item I wanted just to highlight is that in the draft that the commission received, this text under B under 2 for staff to commission was written slightly different, but staff today felt that it should be worded a little differently to refer to sort of the whole idea of scheduling meetings, which includes the construction of agenda. So this text that's highlighted in blue is different from what you received, but the intent is the same.
Yeah, I have two questions. Number one, I don't know if I'm not seeing everybody's camera because they're not turned on, or if I have a setting incorrect in this, what do you call it, in this software. But I was wondering if, people who are talking could turn their cameras on. It's easier to have a conversation and not interrupt each other if we're.
I
And
can see
I
everyone.
And number two, can we enlarge the document that we're sharing, since it has different information or than the one that we received that just has red markups on it?
Can you just say that one more time, Deborah? Do you want me to enlarge the screen?
Yeah, you had it bigger before, so.
Is it how does it look now?
It's still pretty small. Maybe it's settings, or I don't know if people.
I think on GoTo, you can, if you hold down Control and your scroll wheel on your mouse, if you zoom in and out, you can make whatever is being shared bigger and larger to your liking.
How does it look for the other commissioners? Is it small on their screen?
Now it looks good. I don't know what.
No, it looks fine to me.
Okay, all right.
Oh,
If
I
you
just
want me to
enlarged
zoom
it.
in, I can to a specific section, just let me know.
my scroll was moving slowly. Maybe I fixed it with that suggestion, Courtney. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
I've tried this with that with other programs. It doesn't work, but
that's a good trick.
yeah.
One item that came up last time with regard to duties had to do with orientation for new committee members. Not sure whether that's something that would need to find its way into these rules and regulations.
If I may, through the chair, I don't think that's going to be the responsibility of the staff members of the commission, but that you're certainly highlighting something our department has acknowledged as a need. Training courses for any board member joining any board needs board specific support materials and everything. So I think that's probably going to be more of a departmental or administration wide type of support that would be provided rather than specific to the staffing of your commission.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? All right, hearing nothing. Section 3, standards of conduct.
So I had a question about the whether or not we are meeting remotely. Does the commission have the ability to decide itself that it would like to meet in person?
Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if somebody in the administration is like deciding that we should be holding remote meetings or hybrid meetings or in-person meetings, like as a citywide kind of decision making. I know that the boards and commissions are all talking independently about different future conditions. For instance, I know the planning board would like to maintain a hybrid situation in perpetuity. So it might be independent to the board and commission members. I'd have to do a follow-up question related to that one.
And Tim, why do you ask the question? Can I ask?
Well, we've been meeting. I don't think I've ever joined an in-person meeting of this commission since I joined.
There's never been one.
There's never been.
Since you have joined, yes.
Andrew,
Yeah,
I
and I
think
know different cities and towns are handling it differently. I had a meeting in Boston last night, fully remote. I have a meeting in Watertown tomorrow, fully in person. I think their zoning board of appeals just decided that they function better when they meet in person. So they decided everything's going to be in person. I was at their planning board a couple weeks ago, and it was really productive being in person. So I can see a situation where we may decide at some point that we'd like to meet in person as opposed to just remotely. It seems like the way this is written, it talks about giving us the discretion to meet remotely, but not discretion to choose to meet in person.
It's interesting. I mean, the only thing that I would say to that, Tim, is that I agree with you. I think that I enjoy meeting in person. I enjoy being in person. But the other day I had a meeting for a project in Ayer that was fully remote. And I thought about the idea of like having to go to Ayer for an hour at 7 o'clock to drive back an hour, get back home by basically midnight, and it made me think about it for a second. But
I think
It would
that's
be
a good point,
it would be
Frank.
nice to
No, go ahead.
yeah,
Ed.
sorry. It would be nice to like it would be nice to at least have the option to occasionally meet, like
it would be. I would
quarterly
agree.
meet in person.
I'd agree. I agree. I
and-
support.
When it was once a
Yeah.
month, it felt really good. Yeah, it felt, it seemed fine. Meeting twice a month, all of a sudden the commitment is, quite, more significant and
Yeah.
getting there, becomes that much more difficult. So. I
Yeah,
don't know.
just anecdotally, I ran into Tim Hood at Winter Hill one night, and I didn't recognize him after having been in that point.
Same.
Just
Yeah, I
because,
didn't recognize you.
yeah, and that's just a little ridiculous for the amount of time that we spent together.
It
Yeah.
is. And Tim Talon, I met you. We were at some rainy morning at Assembly Square. And I said,
Dan
well,
Bartman has a comment.
Yeah, two things. Funny enough, we have staff members now that have never been in the council chambers where all of these meetings would be held if we were in person, just as because they came on board since the pandemic started when we went remote. I think this is just written from the perspective that the state law requires you to meet in person as a standard, and that you're allowed to deviate that with these remote participation laws that they keep passing each year. So effectively, if they don't do anything in April, I believe it's April, then the remote participation option would expire and you'd be forced back into person.
No.
So I think the state law is always written from giving you the option to meet remotely, and then everybody embraced it here. And maybe now everybody's starting to question how we need to do it in the future, but I think that that's just written from that perspective.
I think the thing that we always run into is that the rules kind of make it sound like we can do anything. And this is kind of my issue with kind of the co-chair situation, but we don't know how to do anything. So we would like to meet in person. What are the next steps to make us do that? And the rules don't really tell us how to do that. The co-chairs kind of don't get back to us in terms of how to do that. How do we do this thing if we want to make the decision and move forward with something as opposed to kind of just chatting about it?
I can follow up with you all, and there's some logistics to take care of at City Hall. To my knowledge, there aren't any boards or commissions meeting in person, but I can see if there are any that I'm unaware of and what they're doing right now. I think the only thing would be to start working through the logistics of actually whether or not we're having a hybrid meeting or an all in-person meeting is a big difference. And things be advertised
I guess that's part of
differently.
the question is is that your responsibility to work through the logistics on that? Is that the co-chairs? Is that Andrew Verminski's? Who are we tasking to do with these things that require follow-up?
I mean, you're really talking about building operations people need to get the committee rooms and the chambers into a condition where they can do that meeting from a technology standpoint. And then we also have to answer questions about, is it being broadcast remotely in some type of hybrid format? Are people able to contact you all, even if you're all meeting in person? Are they able to participate remotely? And all of those things, if the planning board, set aside the co-chair uniqueness of your commission, if the planning board wanted to do the same thing, any one of them would have notified someone like Andrew or myself, and we would just have to take that message back to the administration. And then there's a lot of other people involved to make in-person meetings happen.
I think,
Andrew
sorry.
None of this is written, nothing about how to hold an in-person meeting is written into the rules, typically, because that's what standard operating procedure was pre-pandemic. So there's no language that says to initiate a meeting.
I'm kind of just using that as an example. There's a lot of requests that we have that require follow-up, and it's never entirely clear who is going to be doing that follow-up on our behalf. And a lot of times those requests, we kind of talk about them in a meeting, but the answer never returns to us, and it just sort of gets
Okay.
kicked the can down the line. And that's the genesis of that question. It's less
Okay.
specific to the meeting, but like, who is doing our bidding on our behalf, and who is doing all the follow up for us on the things that we really can't follow up with on our own.
Andrew
Okay,
Gruminski.
So Andrew, to answer your question, I mean, it's staff are the ones who should be following it up. I mean, as staff, that's sort of, in this document as, we're assisting you with logistics. And I would say that, obviously, yes, you're right. The commission has asked staff to do several items that have not had any follow-up. Sometimes things get lost in translation, but I just wanted to address that that's staff's role. The other thing with holding meetings in person, specifically looking at hybrid setting, staff haven't gotten any training on how that works on the technology. We've been talked about it, but there's things on the city's end that still need to be worked out in terms of running those meetings, not just coordinating them with other staff. I have no idea, how to set up a hybrid meeting. So, those are things that we have to look in ourselves, and hopefully that'll be done before April. But I just wanted to give you that context.
Yeah, I think that since we have representation from two divisions, that we can each respectively ask our directors about what's the status of having in-person meetings. And PSUF staffs 4 different commissions, and we are still hybrid or virtual. We've received no direction from the administration on how to change that. We have as far as I know, no additional technology available for anything to do a hybrid setup. That seems to be only available to City Council. So right now we have no direction forward.
So I would suggest revising bullet point 3 here to read, the commission may hold meetings in person, in a hybrid format, or remotely in accordance with relevant state laws and city policy. And I think that just covers that there is the flexibility for that decision to be made in the future. When I initially asked that question, I had thought that we were just kind of meeting remotely as a matter of course, and because it has been planning department policy. I remember talking with George Proakis about this like 18 months ago, but I had not realized that there was an issue with just feasibility of meeting in person. That even if it was consistent with city policy and we all chose to meet in person, that technologically that may not be possible. So that seems like a big issue.
Agreed.
So
if I may, through the chair, that I think that this is internally also a topic that comes up every time they renew this law that allows the remote meetings, because they wait till the last minute, and there's always a panic that we're about to return to in person, and that we're logistically unprepared for that thing to happen like tomorrow. And I think one of the other things that everyone might appreciate is like some runway, if not that you wouldn't provide that, but the transition period is something we're gonna have to prepare the public for, also not having remote meetings, because they've also been, I know that they're just observers primarily for yours, but every other meeting, it's also been held remote for the last couple of years now. So
yeah, okay.
Right, we're gonna do this eventually, right? We're eventually returning to the office, in theory anyway. So I think we're also gonna return to the chambers.
So are we comfortable with that, my suggested edit to bullet point 3?
I like your suggested edit, actually, because this is going to be in place. So I think that writing options and flexibility, like Tim is saying, I think it's good.
Agreed.
Thanks, Tim.
Any other comments about section 3?
Just thinking about our meeting schedule.
Just state again.
I like the edits to bullet point 1 and or point 1 and 2. Notwithstanding emergency situations, any member unable to attend a meeting shall notify the co-chairs. But I'm wondering if it should be at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting, just given that we meet every 2 weeks. It would allow a member to say, I can't attend next week. I have a conflict at the meeting prior to that. Would there be any concern about that? And
Courtney,
Yeah.
can I come in
Andrew
through?
Andrew has something
I
to
don't
say.
always know what I'm doing 2 weeks ahead of time.
Yeah, me too.
Hold on. This is Andrew Gravinsky. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sort of start late, the
Okay.
audio.
Okay, it must be my Wi-Fi. I actually had a question previously, Tim Talon, to what you said for point number 3 under the first section for standards of conduct. How did you want that to read again? I just want to make sure I have it.
the commission may choose to hold meetings in person, remotely, or in a hybrid format in accordance with relevant state laws and city policy.
I'm writing this on another document, but it will be reflected if you do choose to vote tonight in the adopted RPP. I just wanted to make sure to get the right language. Thank you. That's all for me.
Anything else?
So do we want to change it to 2 weeks, or should we, I mean, is that an issue with consistency with other boards?
Well, no, to the point of what, what Andrew said is like, sometimes we get stuff the day before that, I get clients calling me the day before, like, hey, you need to like do this. And I need to like pivot and like, I may
Yeah,
not be
but I
able
think-
to be there, right?
I think that would be the emergency situation, so notwithstanding emergency situations. Like if you know you're going to Italy, then you can let everyone know beforehand.
Oh,
Yeah.
I want to go to Italy, Tim. I do. I do. You guys don't want to hear my pathetic story of me having made a reservation to do a family vacation to Peru in April.
So I think
Yeah, all right.
just changing it to 2 weeks would make it logistic.
Dan Bartman and Andrew Gravinsky, does that produce an inconsistency with other boards and commissions?
With the other boards and commissions, it is 3 weeks. That's what was adopted. And by the way, those boards have adopted their updated RPP document.
Do they meet monthly or?
Also twice a month.
Okay, so in that case, just be that. I've got nothing else on this section.
Me, nothing.
I have no comment.
Okay. Then I take that to move on to section 4 meetings.
Okay. So I don't have anything in section A. Under meeting management in B, this goes to an item that we've talked about, a bigger topic. But I would like under point 2, general business, number 1 to read minutes and UDC recommendations. Assuming that the commission will begin reviewing the written recommendations that it produces.
Through the chair, I think those would take separate motions to vote. And so you might want to just list them one after another. Just insert recommendations between minutes and reports.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
So can I point out that obviously that's okay, but the zoning ordinance provides the board 45 days to issue those recommendations. So just keeping that in mind, that you might not be getting some to review, maybe, you know, not at the exact next meeting. I just wanted to point that out.
I think, yeah, I think that's fine and understood. And it also gives us the ability, if there's a meeting that's canceled and we don't meet every 2 weeks, if we meet once a month, we'd still have the ability to review the recommendation, comment, and vote on it in time for the 45-day time frame. One other just suggestion under timing of review, point 2, there's new text at the end. I'm just wondering if maybe it could be simplified a little and say, the commission shall make every effort to complete design reviews in as few meetings as possible, rather than ensure that design reviews are completed. Just say complete design reviews.
Yeah, that's no problem. We can simplify that.
For special meetings, are those proposed by the chairs, or are those proposed by the commission and voted on to have a special meeting?
Through the chair, typically for any board or commission, that's typically identified by the administration, the need for a special meeting off schedule. And then we would come to the chairs to request that they are willing to schedule a special meeting. So if we were doing this with the planning board, Chairman Capuano would reach out to the planning board members and confirm their availability for another date, but he would make the call that the meeting was going to happen. So in your circumstance, it'd be the co-chairs for the time being, but they wouldn't call that without a quorum of the board or commission being able to meet in the first place. So you would find out about it before a meeting with notice was published out of the blue.
Any other takers for this section?
No, move to the next.
All right, section 5, applications. Any comments? Section 5.
Oh, sorry, I had a few other comments.
On section 4
along that
still?
section. Yes.
Okay. We'll go back to 4.
Just thoroughfares. So I think we had talked a bit about the criteria that we are using to evaluate thoroughfares. And one of the suggestions was, rather than referencing NACTO design guidelines and standards, which I think some members felt, given the various professional expertise in the members on this commission, we don't have any transportation engineers. Perhaps we reference instead the City of Somerville's Complete Streets Ordinance, which kind of more broadly calls for balancing all modes of transportation. And I think the kind of the bigger picture goals that have informed the various plans that have come forward.
To build on that, we're tasked with, we're pretty explicitly tasked with trying to help mobility division's goals. We have no idea what those are.
Yeah.
Through the chair, you definitely need a traffic or transportation engineer designer on the commission, I believe, to fill that gap of knowledge base, I'd say. But the zoning ordinance cites the NACTO design guidelines specifically.
Okay. So how about the question about the mobility division's goals?
You know, the interesting thing is the integration that we created for this commission with PSUF, but not mobility or engineering for the thoroughfare side of this whole equation. So I think you're putting out an interesting gap that we can also talk about in maybe the next iteration of the board, if maybe those staffers become commission members rather than the chairs, that there might also be representation from the people focusing on street design, similar to how Courtney has been with us this whole time.
So what if we changed number 1 to reference the Complete Streets Ordinance instead of, because I think that's kind of a fixed thing that exists, that's been adopted by the city. And I would assume that mobility division's goals are all in keeping with that, are basically intended to implement that.
In my opinion, I think that would be fair to acknowledge those instead. That's a city. You're right. It's a citywide policy that drives the mobility division's work that it does.
Okay. Okay, and then I had a comment on section F here as well, motions on submissions. I'm wondering if we should also have another motion to designate a submission incomplete. I see Andrew smiling.
Just to clarify, are you stating that they're like the materials presented to you are incomplete?
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to point out that one of staff's roles is to make sure that all submissions are complete when they submit. And we try to make sure that incomplete submissions do not get in front of the board. However, if you feel like that is needed, we can still put that in there.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that would fall under item A, right? If you know, our comments would note submission would be incomplete and requesting additional information for a future meeting.
we have
I-
found situations in projects in which, to Tim's point, we have not received all of the information that we feel we should be reviewing, and some of the information has been kind of like not fully complete. So I would agree with Tim, but there has been those instances.
And can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
To clarify, I understand where you're coming from. Do you mean like you feel that the application's incomplete from the submittal requirements, or that there's additional information that the board needs to be able to provide a recommendation that's additional?
Like I would use the example. I mean, I know that we don't want to hear this. The example of the crazy dentist who was trying to do the what is it, the restaurant, and he was doing all of these things, and there was so much information that he was not providing that we wanted, and that became a discussion point. And it was like, no, it's there, and it was not there, and it was like it created for us argumentative components of it, because we were like, no, it's not there. You didn't provide. We don't see what you did. That, so that we can say at that point, I think what Tim is trying to say is that trying to give us the authority, or at least the ability to say, no, we don't believe that you provided all the information that we believe we can review your project with.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
I agree with this. They may check all the boxes, but to convey what is unique, something unique about the project, you need
Correct.
additional information or different information.
Correct.
I think also like they don't even always check all the boxes. I would say the narrative is the first thing on the list, and that shows up about 50% of the time, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my intent was really to capture those situations where the submittal requirements are not met, and which I think doesn't allow us to provide a full review.
I always think I'm just as like a maybe looking at this from all sides, perhaps a way to think about this instead of just adding another motion is that there is the ability for you all to vote no. So if you motion to take a vote on whether a project meets the design guidelines or not, I mean, you could all say no, vote no, and then, that applicant did not meet anything. So I'm just throwing it out there as like a way to embrace your all's power to say no.
Yeah. I think Tim Hood made a good point about bullet point A, capturing that situation. Maybe that's just something we can kind of be more proactive about. If there is a submission that's clearly doesn't meet the submittal requirements, that I think we just need to raise it at the beginning of a review. And rather than going through the whole presentation and discussion in 40 minutes, just up front say it's not complete, because this and this are in the submittal requirements, they're not provided, make a motion to continue the design review to a future meeting.
Dan Bartman, did you want to say anything?
No, I'm good now. You guys all talk it out.
All right.
Said the same things I was.
Would the board find it helpful if there was something related to asking for additional documents that are separate? Let's just say if you continue a design review to another meeting, but I know one time for Thoroughfare 1, you asked for a plan that shows the entrances of all the buildings and Boyne Yards, for example.
Through the chair, I agree with Andrew. Like, you're certainly capable of doing this, but typically the reason for voting no is not in the rules on how to make a vote, or what you can vote on. It's the reason that you're voting no, and it ends up getting cited in the minutes of the meeting and in the decision that gets published. So I think I'm finding myself like leaning towards where Courtney last left off, and where The Tims had identified A as that, you know, you would continue that because there is a lack of information. And then if nobody participated and pulled their nuclear option, then you would vote no to all of the other motions, and with the same reasoning behind that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can, you know, the motion to vote doesn't always have to be a positive, like you all are ready for yes, but if you're all ready to take a vote, no matter if it's yes or no, that the point of conversation is complete to the degree that you are able to talk more about it, you know.
Okay. I think where we're landing on that is just leaving it as it is. Are you okay with that, Frank and Andrew?
I mean, the reason that I brought it up was just for, I don't know, Tim, were you part of that?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so you were part of that. So you remember that. So in protection, not only to ourselves in the city, that's why I was bringing it up, that we have the ability to be able to say, no, your application or what you're doing is incomplete, and therefore we cannot continue, because what the applicant at that point was saying was like, no, you need to blah, blah, blah. And we wanted to be able to just say, no, it's incomplete. You have not provided the information, and therefore we need to move on. And it was kind of a protection that we wanted.
So I think it actually, you know, if that situation were to come up again, I think in that case, we would have the ability either at the beginning prior to the presentation to say the materials that were provided to us do not meet the submittal requirements. We have not had a chance to review them and cannot make an informed recommendation based on that. Therefore, we would make a motion to continue until that information is provided. And I actually think rather than just taking a no vote, because a no vote just allows it to go to the next step. You know, they can go make their argument to the planning board. I think actually saying that the information is not provided, commission can't do, we can't fulfill our responsibility, and the case is continued.
Right.
It seems like a.
It does just from the point of view of the applicant, it does stress the importance of that sort of that internal review happening first, because these people it's been a week since they submitted this stuff by the time we see it, and we're going to kick it out 2 weeks. So it's 3 weeks from when they submitted it to when it's going to be reviewed, based on that timeline, which is, you know.
But if they were to read the thing that we're doing right now, they would realize that if they haven't provided the information, right, moving forward, they could be rejected or not move forward. And I think that's the protection.
I would say there's also probably a reasonable assumption that if it's been placed on the agenda, that they believe.
They can assume. Yep, I agree. Okay. Yeah, that they have been approved. Okay.
There was also it was also mentioned that prior to a presentation, there was applicants' information that was already deemed to be incomplete. So would this motion occur prior to any sort of presentation usually, or it would take place after the full presentation?
I would think it could be either. It would be depending on the situation.
If I could ask through the chair, which way did that conversation tilt us.
I don't think it still does anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I
It's a
think
question.
it's a useful tool for us to have that motion. I would not say that my comments are expressing to not include it. I think the comments that Tim and Frank have brought up present an argument to include it.
Andrew
Courtney, can I say
Grimsby.
something real quick? Thank
Yeah.
you. The situation, Frank, you brought up was a very unique case. Not
Sure.
saying it won't happen again, but that was, and Dan, maybe you can address that a little. That had also other ramifications, not just with UDC. So I just wanted to point that out, that it was by on staff's end deemed an incomplete submission. However, other forces occurred where it was in front of the UDC. And there was a similar case with, you might remember the Broadway Breaks project near the where Taco Lobo is, that site with the two facades. That was also a unique situation where, you know, the zoning changed and then they had to kind of go back, and the applicant wasn't necessarily submitting us a complete application and just kept pushing and pushing until finally, you know, the brakes were no quote, you know, no pun intended, were actually put on the project. So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, staff usually tend to we try to do the best we can to make sure that an application is complete before putting it on an agenda. I just wanted to point that out, that if there was a case where, let's just say there was that situation again, we would make sure that you guys are informed of this before the meeting, so you can make a motion before they present. I just wanted to
Andrew, no, Andrew, I agree with you 100%. What I would say to that would be that people keep their hands to the pulse because this is public information, right? So whatever happens during that public information, other people understand and realize what they can and cannot do, right? So if there's no resolution on something like that, some other developer or the client, or, you know, they go like, hey, wait, you didn't do this on the Broadway site. Why do I, you know, like, so they can listen to it. They can pull it up. They can reference it. And what we want to make sure is that we can say, no, yeah, you can reference it, but it was not complete and we killed it. And that's it.
And just for transparency's sake, can we not use Broadway Break as an example? So I'm a member of the Broadway, my firm is a member of the Broadway Break design team. So like, you can just use it.
No, I wasn't trying to blame anyone. It was, you know, like I said, there's other forces that, you know.
Yeah, I just don't want to impropriety, and I can't recuse myself from the conversation because it's weird, but like.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a different one.
But
Yeah.
we can put that in there. If the commission feels that's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've come after hearing the rest of the conversation. Now I'm back to thinking let's just include it.
Yeah, I don't know if you all are looking at the chat, but Dan Bartman put in, I take it as proposed that it would be a motion that no recommendation can be provided due to a lack of necessary information.
Yeah.
Am I understanding your comment correctly, Dan Bartman?
Yeah, I think in situations, you know, we do our best to make sure that you all don't get stonewalled, but somebody could even show up to a meeting and not collaborate, right? And through the process, and you could request additional information and then they refuse to provide it. And Andrew might try to keep them off the agenda as much as they can, but in the end, a lot of people have the right to appear, even if we're frustrating us in the whole endeavor. And I think that this gives you all a fail-safe to like end that session with this applicant who's might be stonewalling you or not participating in the process, and say, really what you're doing is providing a document to the planning board that says we couldn't complete our task in this process because this person would not, participate correctly. And so we couldn't even provide a recommendation. You're not even voting no. You're saying this isn't a recommendation at all.
And that sounds better.
I think that's a great way to phrase it. I agree completely.
Yeah, it sounds like you all are sort of like open to the continue as a first a first step, and if there's not cooperation for additional things, then this is the other route.
Yes.
Yes.
Does
Andrew
commission
Gruminski.
feel- does the commission feel from an organizational standpoint that should be after item E, so item F? Is that a good place to put it?
Yes.
Okay. We can also wordsmith it a little bit further if that's helpful too.
I like that one a lot. That's good.
Now I have no further comments on this section.
All right, then, officially moving on to section 5, applications.
I have no comments.
I had a question. We receive a preview of the submission to review, and I've noticed that sometimes there's a difference between what I review beforehand and what is presented. Is that all allowed by this document, or is the stuff that's presented formally electronically the documents that should be presented?
If I can address this, Courtney, I think what happens is that the applicant provides more like a set application, and then during the presentation, it might be in a slightly different format from a presentational standpoint. And if it's helpful, would the board want maybe the presentation to be submitted with the application? Would that be helpful, Tim?
I would say yes, yeah.
Okay. We also could word it to make sure that the presentations reflect what was submitted with the application. It's consistent too. We can do it that way.
Yeah. I'd say just thinking about how we work. I mean, I know I've presented things that are different than I've sent pre-submission. So I hope there's some flexibility for, graphic updates and throwing in extra rendering and.
Yeah, I would agree.
But
It happens
the
to, like,
substance,
a lot. Like you'll get the submission ahead of time, look at it, and I'll be like, that's stupid. And then by the time they present, it's much better.
You could also word it, like we've done before, the applicant must make every best effort to make sure that presentation is consistent. Not maybe totally 100% the same as we can word it in the way that it makes sense that some things may be slightly different. That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't think we've ever encountered something that is completely different. There've been slightly changes and new things, but I don't think there's ever been anything that's been a surprise.
Would it just be a matter of a team perhaps identifying a new piece of material than what was
They should
submitted
acknowledge.
officially?
They should acknowledge what's new.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Or if there's a material change to anything.
Material or rendering or mass, anything like from what they've submitted.
To just highlight something that might confuse us. Yeah, but I don't know how you say it.
Through the chair, I might suggest putting all of this content in your submittal requirements rather than the rules of the board's operations. But all of this is right on point. since you publish that also and approve it.
Are you all comfortable with that being part of the submission rules instead of this document? Okay.
And be good for the applicants to know that they should highlight something if there's a change. So I think that is probably where it belongs.
Anything else for section 5? All right then, section 6.
I have no comment.
No comment.
This is probably a dumb question, but are those the only 2 PUDs in the city?
I believe so.
Cool.
Would we have to call out the CDSP for Union? Dan Bartman, do you know? Or is that part of the neighborhood plan?
Through the chair, that was a, design guidelines were not included in the Union Square neighborhood plan. And were added to subsequent plans because of their absence actually in Union Square. So there isn't a document to reference specifically for Union.
And to answer US 2's specific coordinated development special permit, there was also no reference to design guidelines.
All right then. So I think, does it sound, I mean, how do you all feel about next steps? Is this something that you feel comfortable voting on adopting tonight, or would you like the final draft to run through and then vote on that next time? How would you like to proceed?
I feel comfortable voting to adopt tonight with the edits we discussed.
As
Would
do I.
agree.
All right, so I will take that as a motion to adopt the rules of policy and procedure as presented and edited as a group tonight. Do I have a second?
I
Seconded
second.
by Deborah. All right. We can take a roll call vote. Frank Valdez,
Yes.
Andrew Arbaugh,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
Sherry Ruane. I think we lost Sherry at some point. Tim Hood.
Yes.
All right. That completes all of our business for this evening.
Courtney,
Congratulations.
Wait, who's? Yes.
Tim, no.
I got 2 things. One, I just want to thank staff, Courtney, Dan, Andrew, everyone who worked on this. Because I think it's a significant improvement over what we had before. It's a lot of kind of wordsmithing and stuff, but thank you for working through this.
I think PPZ gets all the kudos.
I second that motion, Tim.
And Courtney, take credit for everything. So come
All right, that was all piece up.
on.
Do you think we'll have cases in a couple of weeks? What's happening? No, I know.
Yes, so 600 Windsor master plan, they're currently going through the site plan approval for the building 6 base and thoroughfare. They should be on your agenda, hopefully next month.
Okay.
One other item I wanted to bring up, because I know Dan's on the line as well. It has been now 14 months since we requested to meet with the planning board, which we are tasked with advising. And, you know, Andrew Arbaugh brought up earlier things that have been suggested and not done. I think we've taken a motion. We've made the request. We brought it up a half dozen times.
We've done all
Especially
those
now
things.
that things are slowing down, it would be great to set up a time where this commission and the planning board could have a conversation.
Through the chair, Tim, I will look into how to facilitate that meeting, getting that meeting accomplished. The nuance of that is that they're also in charge of when they hold their own meetings and what their agendas are. And so what do you do if two boards don't want to have a meeting together? So I'll see what we can do to facilitate that through the mayor's office.
Okay.
Not implying anything for the planning board, just saying it's been 14 months.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. Is like 14 months later, we don't even know if they've had the request. We don't know that it ever got farther than this Zoom.
Yeah, so
I
I
can
address
confirm
that.
that's definitely happened, but
Yeah, it
I'm
did
also just
happen.
verbally saying that.
It's been asked of the planning board itself.
Was.
Did they have a response?
I believe the planning board liaison talked with the chair, and it was I think in that setting where they, I guess, I'm not sure what the exact outcome was, but I know it was not at this time.
Anything else? Do I have a motion to end the meeting?
So moved.
Motion to end the meeting?
All right, roll call
Second.
vote.
Sorry,
Roll call
Blake.
vote to end the meeting. Frank Valdez,
Yes.
Andrew Arbaugh,
Yes, please.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
Sherry Ruane, Tim Hood.
Yes.
All right. That concludes the business this evening of the UDC. Thank you all for your attendance and participation. See you next time.
Thanks all.
See you next
Thank
week.
you.
Take care.
Bye.